Holy shit. Okay, so did you see what happened in the Eurodollar futures market yesterday? So, I mean, everybody was focused on the Dow and the Euro being down 3%, the pound being down 3%, dogs and cats living together.
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
Ready to hop in the 6-4 and cruise around the blocks? There's a storm coming to the underworld and the heat is on. Take over the blocks and call the shots. It's time to hustle or get hustled. What's it gonna be? Stay sharp. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. Don't let them catch you slipping. Only real gangsters thrive in the dope wars world.
Me, I'm a geek. You know how this is. And you also know, Rich, like we've been doing this for years now, you know that I didn't want to have to become a credit spread analyst. And yesterday we were chatting, right, on like the Slack server that I have for my patrons, of which Rich is now one of them, and I appreciate that. And he asked about this directly, and it's like, what does that all mean? I'm like, I have to go back in first grade and explain it all. But really, it's not even first grade because this is stuff that I only really internalized like 2 years ago, and I've been doing this stuff for 20 years, right? So,
okay, stop. I'm going to stop you. So we're going to start talking about the Eurodollars, right?
Yep.
Eurodollar market, and hopefully at some point Alexander Mercouris is going to join us, and we're going to talk about what's happening in the UK and Italy, the Italian elections, which is taking place right now as we're recording this on the 24th of September 2022, and plus we'll cover lots of other stuff. But I said to you, oh, and by the way, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, CryptoRichYT, all that business, CryptoRich ODYSEE, CryptoRich3 Speak, which is a censorship-resistant platform.
Right. And
not all of this video will be on YouTube because of YouTube censorship. Thank you very much, YouTube. So I said to you that the pound dropped over 3% yesterday, and then you said, looked at the Eurodollars market. I'm like, oh my God. You said, holy shit, look at the Eurodollars market. So let's just talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that I don't think people realize or they don't dig into, there's all the superficial stuff that the mainstream media presents, or the little bits of knowledge that people pick up, that sort of pretense or the surface stuff. Then there's what's going on in the background that's really running the show. And then what I've learned from listening to you, and thank goodness I'm a patron of your Slack server, such great conversations. I'm learning loads there and getting loads of tips and links.
You and me both, dude.
Ideas.
Like, yeah, those people are
very,
amazing.
very good resource, right? So links in the description below if you want to join Tom's Patreon. So the Eurodollars, all the offshore dollars outside the United States, and what has been happening is Europe has been controlling the interest on the euro, on the USD, because they've got all these dollars outside the United States through LIBOR. We've got the Federal Reserve raising rates. They've set up their own system, so forth. And what they're actually doing is they out to regain sovereignty and control over the dollar. It is their currency after all, right? The Eurozone, EU has got the euro. What a fabulous, fabulous, wonderful currency that is. Better than gold even, right? I'm being very tongue-in-cheek, if you
facetious, completely
facetious. That's right. Rude, even.
Rude.
That's right.
How un-English of you!
In a very British, understated way, right? He says, "Holy shit!" I make facetious, rude comments, impolite.
You know what it's like being English. I'm going to quote John Cleese from A Fish Called Wanda.
Yes. So the Eurodollars.
Are you married? No, my wife died last Thursday.
Okay, so the Eurodollars curve has inverted, which is a really big deal, apparently. Right now, remember, I'm a social worker.
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
Right?
It only happens every once in a while.
Is that bonds that are paying out in the future are going to give lower rates.
Lower rates. Right.
Than bonds right now, and that's upside down finance.
And that's upside down because normally speaking, the longer you put your money away aside and forego the use of it, that's the nominal. That's what the whole argument about bond yield curve is about, right? You buy a bond, I lend you $1,000 for 3 months, right? We write a bond. You know, you're going to give me a bond that's going to pay 3% interest. Well, you know, the longer the duration of that bond, the more interest I should demand.
Yeah.
Because I'm foregoing the use of my money during that time period. So the bond yield curve should always be rising. It may be weekly rising, whatever, but it should be rising. And the slope or the steepness of the curve is a gauge of, the best way to put it is that it's a gauge of trust, right?
Safety,
If it's a lower steep, if the curve is low, has a low rise to it over duration, that means that, hey man, I know you're good for it, as opposed to I only need 25 basis points or 0.25% for 10 years over 1 year, but when it inverts is when what it means is that the demand for money now in the short term is greater than the demand for the money in the long term, and people need more money, value their money between now and 2 years from now more than they value getting their money back 10 years, and that's why an inversion is ugly. Now, in the Eurodollar futures curve,
hold on a second, Tom. What it also suggests to me is that it could be an indicator of panic now.
It's generally used as a recession indicator, that if the yield curve inverts, we're going to have a recession because people are worried about their near-term financial worries, and therefore they're raising your local currency. It doesn't matter if it's dollars, Eurodollars, euros, yen, Vietnamese dong, or whatever, right? So that means that people are just worried, and they demand a higher return on their money, on short-term money, than on long-term. That's what that means. Now, when you see that in the money markets, the overnight, 7-day, 3-day, 7-day, 14-day money markets, that's an indicator of, there are no dollars, and there's going to be and collateral chains are going to start breaking. Derivative people don't have the money necessary to pay their bills at the end of the week. That's why those things are dangerous. Okay, so watching the ultra short-term money markets and looking for breakouts or spasms in rates there is bad. Okay, so that means the demand for money is greater than, that means that in the interbank market, that's what LIBOR represents, the London interbank offer rate, right? And it's the overnight interbank offer rate, right? So LIBOR, London interbank offer rate. And LIBOR comes into various flavors: overnight, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, a year. There's a whole yield curve associated with LIBOR, right? When do people need their money back? And it's also the indexing rate for debt of that same maturity. So your mortgage is going to be indexed to to the longest LIBOR rate that they can come up with, right? With whatever they're willing to quote, because your mortgage is generally going to be 20 or 30 years, right? So now in the Eurodollar futures market, it's a little different, because the Eurodollar market is the offshore dollar market. It's the dollars that are being held in British banks, or in the Cayman Islands, or in Brussels, or in Amsterdam, or in Hong Kong, or in Singapore. And there's just Eurodollars is just a euphemism for all offshore dollars. Now, where we are now is, so watching the Eurodollar markets in the milieu of the Fed aggressively raising rates, but the U.S. no longer indexing its debt to someone else's interest rate, which in this case used to be LIBOR. Okay, we now have our own funding rate called SOFR, Secured Overnight Funding Rate. And there's a fundamental difference between LIBOR, Euribor, HIBOR, all the versions of LIBOR that exist, HIBOR in Hong Kong, Euribor in Europe, blah, 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 is that this is a secured rate. This is the collateralized. This is a market rate that is quoted based on securitized transactions. Okay, this is a much different rate than what we've seen in the past. Okay, so SOFR is a very big deal, and the latest thing that I've been thinking about is, I don't even want to go off on that tangent. Maybe we'll get to it later, and I haven't really given it a complete thought yet. But SOFR is not showing any stress, and it's not going to show any stress if the U.S. banks are full of reserves, and the U.S. bank and the U.S. money markets are flush with cash, which the Federal Reserve has done a wonderful job of. And everybody complains about it. They printed so much money, and there's plenty of cash flowing around the American money markets. Oh, yeah, well, the mortgage market rates are rising, and credit access to capital is rising. That's what you're supposed to do when you want to stamp out inflation, or you want to, put yourself on a sustainable growth path, which we're not on. None of us are on. Okay, So, but when the Eurodollar futures curve is quoted, it's quoted as 100 minus the expected federal funds rate at that moment in time on the curve, right? So if the market expects the Fed to be at 2% in September of next year, then the Eurodollar futures market will reflect that by trading at 98 on the September 23 maturity. Because that's in September of 23, people are expecting that the Fed funds rate will be 2%. And so they're trading around that rate. And so that's a market rate. It's a market expected rate. So watching moves in the Eurodollar futures curve, usually, it used to in the past, used to tell you exactly what the Fed was going to do. Because when there was an inversion, that would tell you when the Fed was going to stop raising rates. Because the market was saying, the Fed, you need to stop raising rates by March of next year. And you need to start lowering rates. And so when the curve starts to go back up, that means that the Fed is expected to lower interest rates. That used to be the tail wagging the dog in things. Now, it's just a spec bet. Now it's just people speculating on where the Fed's going to be. It doesn't have the same power it used to. This is the fundamental key, and I've argued this on Twitter with people who are far more famous than I am, saying, well, I trust the Eurodollar futures curve more. I'm like, why? SOFR exists now. Yeah. And we're not tied, and the US banks aren't tied to LIBOR. And the London banks can't manipulate LIBOR in order to cause stress in the US money markets anymore. And all of a sudden the conversation stops. I'm like, oh, well, activate next clone. Like, yeah, obviously. Okay, picked you off, activate next clone. So who's next? Right? It's a paranoia reference to a classic RPG. And anybody who's an RPG geek knows exactly what I'm talking about. So, and I don't mean to be arrogant about this, but this is the reality. This is, I may come across as arrogant, well, because I am, but I don't mean to be. I mean to actually engage and challenge people as much as possible because I want the truth. I want to understand what's going on. And it's, resting on our laurels is only going to get us bushwhacked in this financial environment. Okay. Case in point, the last 3 days of trading.
Oh my God, the last 3 days, which brings us into what I said earlier about what happened to yesterday I was looking at the US dollar euro and the US dollar cable, US dollar pound, and also the pound against gold and pound against the euro, and then looking at how it's playing out in the UK, and we'll be talking about that, and also how it's likely to play out in Europe. We got the Italian elections happening today, and I just want to say we're going to move over onto ODYSEE. And one thing to acknowledge, certainly for me, this conversation, this bit of the video has been very, very, I suppose, financially technical. But what we are going to be talking about is the effect on
what this means.
On people I suppose, people like me, because it's going to have
seriously,
my friends and family. It really is, and also what's going to happen at the macro level, and for the EU, because I think more fissures in the EU, which is going to crumble. So I'm going to have all the links in the description below. Come over to ODYSEE, bit.ly/CryptoRichOdyssey. It takes a little bit longer for the videos to get up onto 3Speak. And if you're watching this on Rumble, you'll have to come over to ODYSEE to see part 2 as well, okay? All right, Tom, see you over in ODYSEE.